All right, wonderful. Welcome, everyone. Buenas noches. It's a pleasure to be here launching our new series, Sowing Success. I'm Dr. Minerva Romero Arenas. I'm an endocrine and general surgeon. I work at Weill Cornell Medicine, and clinically, my practice is at New York Presbyterian, Brooklyn Methodist Hospital. It's a pleasure to be here today, and on behalf of the co-founders of LSS and our leadership, I want to say welcome to our session. It's my distinct pleasure to share with you a few of our recent happenings. I want to start by sharing a little bit of the Latino Surgical Society. We were established to cultivate, nurture, and support the advancement of Latino surgeons. And tonight's program is definitely in line with that mission. I want to thank our institutional members who have demonstrated a commitment to the Latino Surgical Society, but most importantly to the members at their own institutions. Starting with our platinum institutional members, the University of Washington, Seattle, and Emory University School of Medicine, the University of California, San Francisco, the University of Texas in Austin. Our bronze members, the Massachusetts General Hospital Department of Surgery, Morehouse School of Medicine, University of Alabama, University of Florida, Jacksonville. And our institutional members, the Oregon Health Sciences University, Harbor UCLA Medical Center, Penn State Department of Surgery, Houston Methodist Hospital, and Penn State Health Hershey Medical Center. It was wonderful to connect with all of you. Particularly, I want to say thank you to our inside the operating room directors who have been crucial, and some of our behind the scenes leadership, Mr. Aldo Trevino, who is not pictured here, but is helping us behind the scene. It's wonderful to connect with all of you, and it was a pleasure to meet with many of you at our networking event in San Diego. So without further ado, I do want to say, let's move forward together. And if you have not yet checked out the Latino Surgical Society website, please do so at your convenience and make sure to fill out your membership application formally. So at this time, I'll go ahead and introduce our moderator for tonight's session and turn it over to her for the remainder of the program. Tonight, I have the pleasure of introducing Dr. Gabriela Abril. She's a categorical PGY2 resident at New York Presbyterian, Brooklyn Methodist Hospital here in Brooklyn, New York. She completed a preliminary year of surgical residency at the University of Maryland Medical Center. She obtained her medical degree from the University of Maryland School of Medicine. And Gabby comes to us having moved to Chicago at the age of 17 with the dream of becoming a surgeon. She completed the first 2 years of her undergraduate education at Oakton Community College and then transferred to Johns Hopkins University, where she completed her bachelor's degree in cellular and molecular neuroscience. She was born in Nagoya, Japan, and grew up in Bogotá, Colombia. Doctora, bienvenida.
Gracias. Thank you so much, Dr. Romero, for the introduction. I will now be introducing our panelists. I'm going to start with Dr. Numa Perez. He is a PGY5 general surgery resident at the Massachusetts General Hospital in Boston, Massachusetts. Dr. Perez spent his childhood in El Salvador before coming to the United States at the age of 17 and joining the U.S. Marine Corps. After the Marine Corps, he obtained his bachelor's degree in electrical engineering at UC Berkeley and his medical degree at Harvard Medical School. Throughout his residency, Dr. Perez has had the opportunity to study a wide array of research topics, including the surgical and medical management of pediatric obesity, access to care for racial ethnic minorities, and mobile health technologies. After completing his surgical residency, Dr. Perez will be headed to the Cincinnati Children's Hospital to pursue a fellowship in pediatric surgery. Outside of work, Dr. Perez enjoys spending time with his wife and 3 children. Next is Dr. Angela Perez. She is a current PGY5 general surgery resident at The Ohio State University. She will be headed to the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center, Children's Hospital of Pittsburgh, for her pediatric surgery fellowship. She was born in Lima, Peru, and grew up in Boca Raton, Florida. She completed undergrad at the University of Florida. And prior to medical school at the University of Illinois, she completed a master's in food science and human nutrition and worked as a dietitian at UF. Dr. Alan Utria is a fifth-year surgical resident at the University of Iowa Hospitals and Clinics. After completing his general surgery residency, he will be headed to the Seattle Children's Hospital to complete a fellowship in pediatric surgery. Dr. Utria is a Zimbabwe native born to immigrant parents from Brazil and Colombia. He moved to the US for his undergraduate degree in molecular biology at Princeton University. He received his MD from Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine. Outside of work, his interests include playing chess, racket sports, hiking, camping, and gardening. Lastly, Dr. Alejandra Casar Berasaluce is a chief resident in general surgery at the University of Texas Health Science Center at San Antonio and the incoming pediatric surgery fellow at the Warren Alpert Medical School of Brown University and Hasbro Children's Hospital. Dr. Casar Berasaluce is a first-generation physician and surgeon, born and raised in Monterrey, Nuevo León, Mexico. She obtained her medical degree from Escuela de Medicina Ignacio Altos, the School of Medicine and Health Sciences of the Monterrey Institute of Technology and Higher Education. She also holds a Master's of Science in Clinical Research and Graduate Certificate in Medical Education. Dr. Casar Berasaluce enjoys food, movies, traveling, volunteering, and keeping up with the animal adventures of her veterinarian wife who constantly keeps her on her toes. Thank you to our 4 panelists. A little bit later, I may be introducing Dr. Hallie Quiroz, who is hoping to get out of the operating room to be able to join us.
I'm here.
Oh, hi. I'm going to be introducing Dr. Hallie Quiroz, our 5th panelist. She is in her chief year of surgical residency at the University of Miami Jackson Memorial Hospital and is looking forward to following her passion for pediatric surgery at the University of Texas Southwestern in Dallas. Dr. Quiroz grew up in rural Kansas and earned her medical degree at the University of Kansas Medical School. Throughout her medical training, she has been supported by her family, husband Ivan, and daughters Sofia and Camila. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Okay. So to begin, I'm going to start with asking each of you to share why you chose pediatric surgery. Maybe we can start with Dr. Numa Perez.
Sure, yeah. Why pediatric surgery? I think first of all, I've always loved kids. You know, ever since I can remember, I was always the young sort of, even when I was single guy who would like carry a baby and not have to like stretch my arms out like that. You know, I've always loved kids. I've enjoyed being around them. And then I think as I you know, sort of came through medical school and then residency, I think what really got to me was the enormous potential that a child has, or a young person, right? And that's not to say that adult patients don't have that same potential, or that a 70-year-old doesn't have potential. But when you think about, you know, when I think about my own youth and when I was 18 and 19 and 20 and 25, I mean, you know, my story wasn't written. In fact, if you would have met me at 25, I would have told you I wanted to do something completely different. And so when I treat kids and 20-year-olds and 19-year-olds, I think of that, you know, and I think about the fact that their story is not written, hasn't even begun, and to have the privilege to sort of, you know, touch their lives at that point and hopefully change their trajectory. It's just something that always blew my mind, and now that I have kids, that only strengthened that. So I think that's why I went to pediatric surgery.
Absolutely. Dr. Casar Berasaluce.
So for me, I always knew I wanted to be a surgeon. I didn't even ever have any other thoughts about that. I think part of it is I was raised by, my dad was an engineer. He worked in maintenance and mechanics and electronics, and I just really enjoyed fixing things. And my mom was a kindergarten teacher, so kids have been in my life since I was born. After I started medical school and everything, I've just realized, you know, kids are the most honest patients you'll ever have. You know when they're sick, you know when they feel better. they tell you what they need, just, open books. They have their whole future ahead of them, just like Numa said. In the OR, I mean, their anatomy is gorgeous. The procedures we get to perform are so vast and so just exciting. It's just a wide array of possibilities, and seeing kids not only heal, but, recover and grow and develop, and just like Apsa likes to say, you don't save lives, you save lifetimes. And that just really resonates with me.
Children are very resilient. Dr. Quiroz, any thoughts?
Yeah, no, I completely agree with the other two panelists that I originally went to medical school thinking I was going to do pedi hemonc, and so when I did surgery, I fell in love with it, and then realizing that pediatric surgery is its own thing, I really got really excited about it and kind of worked from there on to make that happen. And kids are just the best patients. Like, I mean, we all know that. Immediately when a kid feels better because they're playing. When a 6-year-old, after you take out their appendix and they start playing, you're like, oh yeah, they're feeling better. So there's not a lot of mind games that go on. Like, anyways, yeah, kids are the best. That's why PD is the best.
Absolutely. Dr. Utria, why did you choose pediatric surgery?
Yeah, so similar to what's already been said, I just really enjoy working with children. It's a lot of fun, to see them in clinic, to round on them on the floor. And then the cases to do are really interesting. The pathology is very interesting. And as already alluded to, children do very well. And if you can just get them through whatever they're going through, they do go on to live long and interesting lives.
Absolutely. I think Dr. Perez, I don't know if you have additional thoughts as to why you chose pediatric surgery.
I'm similar to like everyone else, but I think one additional thing is that selfishly, like at the end of the day, like surgery residency is so hard and the days are so long. But when I go see a consult and it has to be open the door and it's a little kid and they just want to get back to playing, they just want to get back to having a lollipop, that's all that they want. Like, how could I complain about it? So it made me so much happier to just be at work, and it was something that I loved, that I wanted to do. It made those long nights, I made those long days worthwhile.
I see. I think we all have a theme, so pediatric surgery resonates with all of us. But I feel like in some of the bios we heard some interest in research, and I think we've all heard that in order to get into pediatric surgery fellowship, you need to have done some research. Did you all do research before applying to ped surgery? I know that in Dr. Perez's bio itself, it did some. There was some interest there, but perhaps we can start with him and your research in pediatric surgery.
Yeah, of course, but to be fair, I want to reverse the order. Why don't we start with Angela and then I'll go last, because otherwise
That sounds good.
Angela's gonna have to say every time, yeah, like what they said. Go for it, Angela.
So I decided to pursue pediatric surgery when I came back to research. I went out after a second year. I did 2 years of the lab, and then I came back as a third year to pediatric surgery, and I loved it and I fell in love. So, but when I went out for research, I worked with Dr. Pollock, who is a chair at my department, and he did primarily outcomes studies. So if you were to like ever PubMed me, everything that I have written is about cancer outcomes, disparities in cancer outcomes, health literacy, everything has to do with cancer. And yes, like topic not what I'm going to study in the future. I learned such important skills, not just about being a great researcher, but about like how to push myself. I had been told numerous times throughout the interview cycle that I had one of the most publications ever, which is fine. didn't know any better. All I wanted to do was like, I got to do more. I got to do more. I got to do more. So I pushed myself and I created this story. And the story is what came across, I think, during my interviews is that I learned how to hone this skill and I learned how to push myself outside of my comfort zone. I could have just done a couple of them, but I wanted to do more. I wanted to see how much more can I do? What more can I accomplish? And I learned valuable skills. I got a master's in public health during the same time as well. And it shaped who I ultimately will be as a doctor, as a surgeon, as a pediatric surgeon. And so I think it was also like my time. I think as people start to decide on their application and figure out what it is that they need to do, what it is that they want to do, a lot of it's also another thing that's really important is just figuring out what's going to make you develop into a better individual, because that's the story that people love and that's the story that people really resonated with. I think like my 2 years were not at all in pediatric surgery. I probably have like the fewest papers in regards to pediatric surgery from like my entire class of applicants, but I still did well and it was just a story.
Absolutely. How about Dr. Udria?
Yeah, so I knew I was interested in pediatric surgery prior to going out to research. And I'd been interested in basic science. I did basic science in undergrad. So I looked for basic science labs where to take research residents. And I spent my 2 years studying fibromyalgia, which is just a rare liver cancer that you see in young adults and adolescents. And, you know, like Angela, I also like learned a lot about myself, learned how to push myself. You know, basic science can be quite difficult, and it's a lot of failure and very little success on a daily basis. But if you are interested in basic science, I definitely think it's worth it. It's fun to know that you know something that nobody else in the world knows, and just kind of build on that and try to get it published. And I also spent time while I was in the lab doing some clinical things too, because you do need to publish and have something on your resume. So I was also part of some of the consortiums like PSORC, and that's a good way to get involved as well with the different things that are happening within the pediatric surgery world.
Did you take time after second or third year for?
Yeah, so I went out after my third year, and there's pros and cons to doing it the different ways. If you go out after your second year, it gives you a whole year buffer to like finish things up and be ready for your application. But if you go out after third year, then when you come back, you're a 4, which is quite a nice thing to do. So I was quite happy to come back as a 4, not a 3.
I see. And Dr. Casarvela-Salusa, did you also do research for?
Yeah, so my research experience has been very varied, but also very like longitudinal. When I was in med school back in Mexico, my research experience was very more like epidemiology type research and a lot of field and community research. So a lot of on the ground, like door to door in underprivileged communities. Between medical school and residency, I decided to do a targeted research program with tactics and everything. And I was at Boston Children's Harvard Medical School. And my projects there were, a lot of them were basic science and some of them were translational science. So I was doing large animal surgery, small animal surgery, and device design. And the reason I did that was to really, I mean, everyone that goes into medicine is in some way an academician, but I really wanted to dive into the mindset of being an academic physician, an academic surgeon, especially in my transition from Mexico to the United States. I think during that time, I learned all the like more rigorous methodology and study design and all that. And I just really appreciated the science of it. I've always been a science person. I completed that time, matched into residency, and didn't really continue my basic science. And when it was time, so I, like you, started as a preliminary surgery resident. So that sort of puts a pause on everything else, because your next goal is just to get a categorical spot. After I did match categorical, I applied very broadly for research positions in pediatric surgery, and ended up deciding that was completely of novel and different. And I actually didn't know if it was going to be like well accepted or well everything, but I thought it was something that was going to make me grow more as a person. So I ended up doing research that was some like social media, educational type research. If you guys have taken a look at the Stay Current in Pediatric Surgery app and podcast, it was a lot of development of that sort of platform. At the same time, I did feel, I can't just like leave the science aside, because pediatric surgery, it's a serious field. We want to keep doing all of that. And I really got into more type of clinical work on the side, like Alan was saying, just outcomes research. And I delved into a lot of different projects like value-based care and cost of care for some of the, a lot about implementation studies. And I actually ended up just by pure luck of being in the right place at the right time, starting an actual multi-center study in 11 Children's Hospital with the Midwest Pediatric Surgery Consortium, which was super exciting just to get a project off the ground. So it seems like all over the place, but I think I like to see it it made me grow as a person more than anything else. I hate to catalog research as like you have to do your research years and like mandatory kind of thing. My junior residents are probably tired, but I always tell them like, this is your professional development time and your personal development time. Like you're going to grow as a person. There's a lot of things you can do. The world is not limited to just research anymore. Like if you're interested in policy, you can like go and do like healthcare administration degree, or you can, I was talking to one of my attendings, I was like, knowing what I know now, and if I was more involved in advocacy, like I ended up getting involved later in the game, I was like, I've done a part-time JD while I was out in research and been an MD JD. And all of those options exist, and just show your path and growth as a person and what you can bring to the field, which is just exciting. And for me, that taught me not only, critical appraisal literature, but also science communication, and just improve my communication skills, presentations, networking, and just meeting everyone in this field that ended up being like just so welcoming and so fantastic.
And just to confirm, there was a period of time that you took specifically where you did all this, like after second or third year, you had 2 or 1 year?
Yeah, so I went 2 years to Cincinnati Children's between second and third year. So 3 years between med school and residency, 2 years between.
Got it. Okay. And Dr. Quiroz, what did you do for your research?
Yeah. So yeah, I went out after my second year. I did 2 years of research. I was mainly in Dr. Omaida Velasquez's basic science lab. Kind of on topic, I believe was the first Latina chair of surgery in the United States. I believe, don't quote me, but I think that's true. But anyways, she's a, basically the triple threat of surgeons. And anyways, so I did vascular kind of basic science. I worked with stem cell therapy and gene therapy for angiogenesis in critical limb ischemia, which is not super relevant to pediatric, because a lot of pediatric patients are not smoking and do not have vascular, like critical limb ischemia. But it does actually have a lot to do with wound healing. Actually, there were a few interviews that I had that actually we just talked shop the whole time about, stem cells or gene therapy. And so, but, like Dr. Utria mentioned, at the end of the game, it is a little bit of a numbers game. So you do have to have papers under your belt. So, so then I did pediatric outcomes research with my mentors here. And, one kind of point of advice I would just say, kind of like Alex was alluding to, but, it's really just doing what you're passionate about. So you don't have to do basic science if you're not passionate about it, right? Because if you go into basic science lab and you're not passionate about it, you're going to spend 2 years, hating it. So, you just really just kind of have to find what you're passionate about, or even just what sparks your interest, and then go from there. And I think, you'll be successful if you follow that path.
During that time that you were doing research, did you know you want to do pediatric surgery, or?
Yeah. So I worked with, I did the vascular basic science, because I always wanted to do the basic science lab. I thought that the work that they were doing was really interesting, which it was. Skills such as, culturing stem cells, working with stem cells, working with cell lines, and transducing, using gene therapy to transduce cells. So all of those things I kind of wanted to learn. My pediatric surgery mentors here at the University of Miami, then I did a lot of outcome stuff with them.
Got it. And then lastly, Dr. Perez.
Yeah, I don't know why or how I matched after hearing what all the amazing things you guys did. It's amazing. I also took 3 years of research actually after my third year. I have a background in engineering, and so I've always been interested in sort of technology and also just sort of data type of research. And so a lot of my work was, in the health services research field, doing, outcomes-based sort of analysis using, national databases or state databases or clinical databases from our own institution. Topic-wise, I think just to echo what everyone said, I just went with my passion or the things that interested me, So I had an interest in pediatric obesity just because it's, obviously it brings the patient population that I like, but also it's a place where disparities happen very frequently, right? Like we know who suffers from obesity more, and then as a surgeon, I wanted to sort of explore the area of bariatric surgery, which I think if you would have told me bariatric surgery in children and adolescents like 5 years ago, I would have been like, that sounds like something we should not be doing. And then, but when I realized that that's actually something that's done, and then it's probably the right thing to do, I went and started studying it. And one of the things that I did is I like some folks have alluded to, I didn't restrict myself to just surgeons, for example. So I started doing surgical research in that area, but then I started working with weight medicine doctors, and we did projects together, looking at the medication side of the house. We started looking at the parent side of the house, at the same time, I also was doing other projects related more to disparities and health disparities. And, again, I knew I wanted to be a pediatric surgeon, but I was during those years I was more interested in just pursuing the questions that I found interesting. And sometimes the pediatric patient population may not be the right clinical population to answer a particular question that I had. And so I did projects related to diverticulitis, and broad general surgery. And at the end of the day, they just happened to be the patient populations that lent themselves to answering the questions that I wanted to answer. And that's totally fine, And then, sort of a third interest, like I said, I've always been a tech guy, and I've always enjoyed that. And so I had the opportunity of leading the development and the deployment of an mHealth platform that is, has a component which is an app, but also it's just a web portal and a lot of things to help colorectal patients go through their perioperative journey. And it sort of deploys a pathway, and it has logic built in behind it, tries to triage complications early, collects patient-reported outcomes and things like that. And again, that's like an adult colorectal patient population, but that happened to be the best population to deploy this project just because of, the nature of surgery and everything. So, I just, though I want to be a pediatric surgeon, that's the population that I chose. And so, with those three interests and working with different groups, it kept me busy. It kept me sort of curious. And I think one of the things that I think the applicant should probably know is at the end of the day, what really matters is that when you sit in front of someone who's interviewing you, two things. Number one, you should be able to tell a story. Several folks have mentioned tell a story. You should be able, your work should tell some kind of a story, should have some kind of arc. You should think of the project that you get involved in buckets, and and hopefully you shouldn't have 15 buckets, because then it just looks like you're just doing a wide array of things that have nothing to do with each other. So try to bucket your work into, I don't know, 2 or 3 different areas of interest, and then number 2 is be able to express it with passion, right? Like I've had the opportunity to review applications now for residency, for example. I'm sure you guys all have, and it doesn't really matter what people did for research or for professional development broadly, as long as you can stand in front of me and just say it with a glisten in your eye. Like, that's the candidate that I want, even if it was like Hallie studying vasculopathy and like people who smoke, and you're like, I don't think my patients are ever good. It doesn't matter, right? Like, I'm sure she relayed that with a great deal of passion. And then obviously those are skills that she can translate to the pediatric population when she's ready to do that, So that's the key, pursue the things that interest you. You'll be able to convey them with passion, and then do try to sort of bucket things so that it doesn't look like you just can't figure out what you want to do. So
That's really excellent advice, and you guys are all pretty amazing. It sounds like you all knew before going into research that you were interested, at least, or wanted to pursue pediatric surgery. I think one of the questions that we also wanted to ask was when and what steps did you take to prepare to have a competitive application? It sounds like it started pretty early in residency. Dr. Casar?
So for me, like I said, I always wanted to be a surgeon, a very early pediatric surgeon. So in medical school, I really took advantage of every rotation because, there you can learn something from every rotation, even the ones you don't want to do for the future. So like, it's not about just like, oh, I'll do everything surgery and ignore everything else. No, like you have to go and sit in the reading room in your radiology rotation and your peds rotation, learn all you need to know about like kids, because you will be taking care of them, from every rotation. It's not about just like acing the test, just really immerse yourself in all the clinical experiences, because all the little tricks come from everything else. For residency, I think I did do some research in preparation for pediatric surgery. I think for me, mostly it was, again, to get adjusted to the academic surgeon persona, and it actually, ended up leading to a lot of personal and professional growth. In residency itself, again, don't neglect other rotations that are, not pediatric surgery. You really learn techniques from everything. Like if you're in your vascular rotation, like those tissue handling and anastomosis are going to be super helpful for pediatric surgery too, and colorectal and everything else. And you have to be very comfortable in honing all of these skills, because you have to be a general surgeon before you are a pediatric surgeon for now. I think for me, because my pathway is a little more non-traditional, there were a lot of extra steps that were just like, as an IMG first matching into surgery, as a prelim resident, next step has to be matching categorical. You can't sort of think that far in it, even though you have your long-term goal, you can't just be like focus on that one, because there's several intermediate steps that you need to accomplish to get there. I mentor a lot of medical students and interns, and they're like, oh, but I don't have like 300 papers on my CV. And I'm like, you're not applying for a pediatric surgery attending position. You're a medical student. Like, just make sure that you're not always so lost in the next step that you are neglecting the step you're currently in. Because that the system sort of puts you in this thing, like in med school, you have to be thinking of residency. In residency, you have to be thinking of research. But if you neglect the step that you're in, you really don't have anything to build on. So just make sure you are, you give your full attention, full person, and bring your whole self to work like every day and build upon that, because you're going to need that in the future.
Sorry, I think I muted myself. Dr. Ujira, what are some steps that you took to prepare a competitive application for pediatric fellowship?
Yeah, so I think one thing that is helpful to do, especially early on in residency, if you hear of senior residents doing projects, looking for help, early on, just say yes to everything. Just get on as many things as you can, learn the ways to do research, learn about the projects that are happening, and just get involved. And then once you start to learn the different things that are happening, the different ways to do things, then you can do what Numa said, where you think, okay, what's going to be my story? What's my interest? Let me start thinking about my buckets. If you're interested in pediatric surgery, you can go to the APSA website, and there's a whole page full of different research opportunities. So I left the University of Iowa to go do my research at the University of Washington. And that's just because I found the opportunity on the APSA website, and I emailed 10 or so different people, had phone interviews, had some in-person interviews, and was able to find my research position that way. So look out for those things. Definitely, come to things like this, talk to residents ahead of you, who can always be a really great resource. And the nice thing about residents who are ahead of you in this is that they go on to then be fellows ahead of you, and then attendings ahead of you. So they'll be a resource forever.
Thank you. Dr. Perez, when did you start preparing your pediatric surgery application?
Yeah.
What did
So
Well, oh, what is
Oh,
it?
no, you should say.
Paredes.
it's at Perez, but
so I didn't know I wanted to do pediatric surgery. When I picked my residency program, I knew that I wanted to go to a residency program that would give me the opportunities to be able to be as competitive as I wanted to. I knew going into residency that Surg-Onc and Ped Surg are the most competitive at that time fellowships, but I wanted to make sure that whatever program I could go to, that I wanted to make sure that I was going to be able to be successful if I wanted to match into either of those places. And when I went out for research, I did my research after second year, and I did what was important to me as a researcher, like health disparities, public health. I have no idea how to pipette anything. I have no idea anything about cells. I thought cells were at a museum, and that you could literally go and see cells on display. So my co-residents, I'm like, can I go see your cells? I really want to see them. And they're like, Angela, it's in a microscope. I was like, oh, this is not as cool as I thought it was going to be. So I knew that I didn't want to do that. So I found a program that allowed me to develop my skills as a so then when I came back from research as a third year, I was like, I really like this. I like this a lot. I talked immediately to the fellows that I had at Danny Gonzalez, who's now an attending at Austin, Texas, and talked to her. And I'm like, I really like this. I don't understand. I didn't think I was going to necessarily do this, but I am so happy. She's like, Angela, I knew you were always going to do this from the intern year. And I was like, oh my goodness. So then I had a conversation with my mentors at Nationwide. I was like, this is my application. What do you guys think about applying to Ped Search? They're like, oh, okay, you did your research, your AppSite scores are fine. And then a lot of it then came up to the fact that, what story are you going to tell? Who are you? And what's your passion behind this chosen profession? So I think all along the way, I just took advantage of opportunities that I had that were presented to me. And ultimately, I didn't know how they were all going to fit. I didn't realize that working with Dr. Pollack was really going to set me up the way that it did, and the opportunity that I got to meet other people along the way at con helped in regards to where I was when I applied. But all of that was done genuinely. I genuinely wanted to meet those people. I genuinely wanted to go to those conferences. So when I would hope that when telling my story for applications, that they could see the glimmer in my eye, that it was genuine, it was real. This was an honest effort, and I really loved what I had done, and I loved the work that I was doing. But I did not know. It was literally mid third year, when I fully was this is what I'm going to do. And then figuring out how I can't change my opinion in less than a year. What do I do? How do I tell this story in a way that's going to convince programs that hey, this girl's for real?
I see. The last question before we take a few questions from the audience, I guess I'm going to direct to Dr. Perez and Dr. Quiroz, is similar to the previous one, but what are some tips that you can share about the application process and the interview process now for pediatric surgery fellowship? Dr. Perez.
Yeah, I mean, everything that Alan and Alex and Angela said for as far as a computer application. So research, for better or worse, matters a lot in pediatric surgery just by the sheer fact that there's always way more applicants than there are spots, and so do seek those research opportunities early, as early as you can. Like Alan said at the beginning, just say yes to everything. But do make sure that you make those things happen. You want to be somebody who once you accept something, you get it done, right? And that's how you start to move up, and then your mentors start allowing you to pursue your own ideas, right? So research is crucial. I think one of the other things that I know at least Alan and I did, I think Alex did, I'm not sure, but I had an opportunity to be in one of the committees at APSA, right? And it's not like a competitive application. They just send an email and you say, hey, can I be in this committee? And then they accept you. And then, you're actually like Zoom meetings with surgeons, like pediatric surgeons from all over the country. But you're like equals, you're talking about some project or whatever it is that your committee's doing. And in that moment, like they don't see you as a resident, they're not some hotshot attending. It's really just, you're all just like committee members trying to make something happen. And so that's very helpful. And it certainly helps to start putting your name and your face out there. So that's sort of application thing. I guess the last thing for the application is try to identify mentors early, mentors in pediatric surgery early. Letters of recommendation obviously matter a lot, but also like in pediatric surgery, like the phone calls matter a lot, right? Like, so people at fellowship programs will call their friend at your program and say, hey, what's the deal? What's the deal with this person? What's the deal with Hallie, right? Like, what's the deal with Alan? Like, he looks great on paper, but is it real? And you want to have mentors in your program who've known you for like 2-3 years, 4 years. They know you personally, they know you professionally. So, as soon as you have a sense that this is what you want to do, start meeting with those people, start having them get to know you. So when it comes down for them to write you a letter, they can write you a truly sort of meaningful letter that's not just regurgitating your PubMed, you know what I mean? So I think that's sort of the third step that I would say for the interview, for the application. The interview, it can be grueling. It's we all saw each other on Zoom so many times, every single one of us here. It was actually fun to see each other. I think prepare. That's the only thing I'll say for the interview. You're not going to be able to wing it. It's going to come off wrong. You have to prepare. You have to ideally either seek out a mentor. I had the fortune of having a good friend who had just matched himself to pediatric surgery, who basically, sat down and coached me. And he was like, all right, brother, here's what we're going to do. And he like interviewed me like hard. I was like, wow, these questions are hard. And then I went back and started thinking about answers. Think about tell me about a time that type of questions. And if you literally think for like 5 seconds, you know exactly what situations they're going to ask. Tell me about a time that you had a conflict with a colleague. Tell me about a time that the nurse or a patient or whatever, the circumstances or the scenarios are kind of canned. But if you haven't thought about it, you will freeze, or you will give a generic answer. But they're not looking for a generic answer. Their question was, tell me about a time. So they're looking about an actual time and a story. And when you tell them a time and a story, that sticks in their brain way better than if you just give them some kind of generic answer because you hadn't thought about this. So practice, ideally with somebody who's gone through this or a similar process, and then think about those answers and have them ready, because they will come, and you want your answers to be succinct, to be on point, and to be memorable. So.
Yeah, I think I'll just echo the importance of mentors. My mentors, kind of, took me through every step in the process. Not only, I mean, our mentors are first our surgical mentors, right? So, we learn so much from them intraoperatively and working with them on a surgical team. But then you get the additional kind of research aspect, and then the professional coaching and kind of guiding you through the process. And so, yeah, I think the mentors is so important. And even, my pediatric surgery mentors were obviously, kind of the most integral in my whole process, but also, Dr. Velasquez, who was, I was in her lab, I think one thing that you don't always realize is that the academic surgery world is actually fairly small. The pediatric surgery world is even smaller, but the overarching kind of academic surgery world is very small. And so a lot of the higher ups in pediatric surgery know Dr. Velasquez just because they're all in these leadership committees together. And so you don't realize, initially I didn't realize that, being in a vascular lab was going to help my prospects. But then when I started going on interviews and I realized, oh my gosh, like everyone knows Dr. Velasquez, then it kind of like, oh, so, ultimately, it didn't hurt me that I was, studying vascular paths.
Thank you, everyone. We have 4 really interesting questions in our Q&A. I think maybe one, I'm going to ask one of you to answer maybe the questions, and then if anyone else has anything else to add, maybe you can just like add at the end of the answer. So the first one is, can you expand on the importance of AppSite scores across the years of residency, and what percentile should we be aiming for to be very competitive in most of those selected specialties? Maybe Dr. Casar can answer that question.
Yeah, so only a couple of programs really sort of specifically zoomed in on AppSite scores. I think you have to have like a solid performance where like, you want to be above 50th percentile, you want to be like consistent, or if you had one inconsistent one, you want to show improvement. I will say there's a couple of programs that were very particular about it. They actually showed us graphs in our interviews, like this is your class mean and median, this is where you stand. So if I recall correctly, the class median was like between 70 and 80 or something like that. It was like high 80s for the mean, but I know there's applicants that, not everyone has 99 percentile every year. And I don't think that they were as important as, for example, USMLEs are when I guess in our time applied to general surgery residency. I think it's more like a checkbox, like you've proven that you can take tests. And the interviews for pediatric surgery and the application for pediatric surgery were very different than general surgery, in the sense that like in general surgery, it was more like teachers interviewing students. Pediatric surgery fellowship interviews for me really felt more as we are equals. We are trying to hire you as a partner, and we really want to know who you are as a person. A word that they said a lot during interviews was like the path traveled, distance traveled, and things like that. So they really wanted, again, your story. It's a pretty type of holistic review. You need a minimum to, I guess, like get through the door. But for everything else, I think AppSite scores were probably one of the least important things of our applications.
I'll move on to the next question. Thank you for that. Someone is asking, for us that are currently in our research years, it is often tough to define what productive is. I feel like the generic answer I get when I ask is publish a lot, but I was wondering if you all have more concrete answer with your experience. Dr. Utria.
Yeah, unfortunately, there is no like magic number. There are actually publications you can look up, like how many publications the average person has when they match into pediatric surgery, and what their AppSite scores are on, what matters and what doesn't matter, as far as those who matched and those who didn't match. So I encourage you just to read that for fun, take it with a grain of salt. But I feel like the numbers continue to go up. And so what productive means, it's hard to say, because again, if you join a basic science lab and you publish one paper in Cell, everybody's going to be really impressed, right? But if you do clinical outcomes and you publish one paper, even if it's the New England Journal, you're not going to get the same kind of like wow factor. So there's no magic number. You just need to make sure that you're not sticking out. You're as being on the lower end of the spectrum, and that's true for the ABSI too. You just don't want people looking at your score and going, oh, they either just don't want to be, as long as they're not underimpressed, you're going to be fine. So just do research you like and publish things that you think are important and that you can talk about, because if you can talk, they're going to ask you about your research on all your interviews. And if you know your research and you're excited about your research and you've published it, then you are productive.
Dr. Quiroz, what is something you wish you would have known as an intern when you reflect back on your journey to peds surgery?
Oh, well, I mean, I'm going to answer this question more as just a surgeon. The thing that I think when you're an intern, at least at my program, we're so clinically busy. We have so many patients that we're taking care of that when I was an intern, I look back and I think I didn't get into the operating room as much as I now looking back, I wish I would have. I think that surgery is all about experience, and it's all about seeing the anatomy multiple times. I texted Numa today because I was like, hey man, I'm going into this ugly gallbladder and I don't know how long it's going to take. Luckily, we were able to get it out laparoscopically. It was the craziest gallbladder I've ever seen. It was like, it was like bilobed. It was insane. But having seen something like that is like the kind of thing you want to see in residency. You don't want to see that the first time as an attending. So really just understanding that, the more time you spend in the OR, I think the better. And whatever you got to do as an intern to get into the OR, I think is probably key. More from just being a surgeon standpoint, not necessarily like pediatric surgery, specifically.
Got it. Dr.
Gabby,
Perez,
I'd like to interrupt a little bit.
Go ahead.
I want to go back to the previous question about productive. I think one super important thing is that we really redefine the word productivity. If you look at my CV, my publications do not compete with the 200 publications that Angela has in 5 minutes. But productivity for me was a lot of other things that I did. And you want to pretty much be in the room where it happens. Like Numa brought some of this up, be in the committees, be in, at the conferences. If you're going to do global surgery, show your impact. It's about impact. What you did had a consequence, and those consequences are the product of your hard work. And I know there's people in our match class that, I can think of Alexis, who just won the surgical humanitarian award because of all her work in global surgery. Numa had apps and some technology to sign and grants. I just remember moments that were so powerful that, because I went to the conference and presented something, then someone asked me a question, then they invited me to a meeting, the meeting got to a committee. And then all of a sudden, this tiny PGY2 from San Antonio, Texas, that no one knew who she was, is in the APSA Board of Governors meeting. It's those things that really your productivity. You went, if you did education, you actually educated the world. If you did outcomes research, you did something. It's not just about the number of papers, and I think in this field they do look at that. And it's all, again, the story you tell, but I do think productivity is more than just the number of papers. You don't want to just be pushing out 200 case reports, because that's not going to make you a better person. And that's not going to, grow the impact you have in the world as you build your own story.
I think one of the questions that was asked towards the end of the Q&A was related to whether you needed to do research within pediatric surgery. And I think they've answered very extensively that you don't necessarily need to do research within pediatric surgery. You just need to do something that's important to you, meaningful, and that creates a story. And so with that being said, I'm just gonna also ask this other question. For Dr. Perez, there's a fourth year medical student that's applying to general surgery that wants to know what can they do to help their chances to get into pediatric surgery fellowship. And they're wondering if where you go to residency really matters for applying to pediatric surgery fellowship.
I think it's hard. I think as a fourth year medical student, if you knew where you wanted to go in regards to your fellowship or like what you were looking for in the future, you know, you're striving for the best. You're striving for the big academic programs, because when you're at the big academic programs, your mentors are usually the leaders of all of these institutions, are the ABSA presidents, are the people that are sitting in these board meetings, are the people that know other people. So you try to strive, you know, if this is what your story is, and your story is like, I want to be an academic pediatric surgeon, this is what I want to do, then you have to surround yourself with people who know them. It is an uphill battle if you come from a program that is not as well known, but it's not impossible. I mean, it's all about you trying to make the most of the situation that you had. There are plenty of people that are great pediatric surgeons that come from smaller community programs and have done wonderful, are changing the field of pediatric surgery. But when you hear them talk about their story, you figure out that there's a story that, like, yeah, they had hardships, but they made the best of that situation. They sought out research opportunities at the big academic centers, at the children's hospital. People, maybe their experience was not 2 years, maybe it was 3 years, or maybe they did an extra year after finishing residency at a non-ACGME pediatric surgery fellowship. So I think it's all about persevering. I guess you truly want to do, you want to set yourself up for the best next step, like Alex was mentioning earlier. So if I was a fourth year and I knew that I wanted to do pediatric surgery, I would try to go to the best program that will take me, which is what was my approach when I was a fourth year medical student. I was like, I want to go to the program that can set me up for what I want to do in the future. If I want to be a general surgeon, I know that I'll be trained to be a general surgeon, but if I want to pursue something that's competitive, I want to make sure that that program can support me. And fortunately, I had the opportunity to go to a program like that, but you have to know what looks like right now, and where is the best next place that you could go to.
Going off of that, just to close, we hear that a lot of residents training at community programs may have difficulty matching into pediatric surgery. Is there any of you that may have any words of advice for those residents?
You know, I would encourage you guys, I would invite anybody to think about, you know, in disparities research, sometimes we think about immutable and mutable factors, right? And we think about things like race is immutable, right? Like you can't, sex is immutable. If you're a fourth year medical student, where you go to residency is pretty much decided, right? Like there's little you can do as a fourth year medical student to change your path. If you're already at a community program, you're at a community program, you are where you are, right? You can't change. So I would invite you to think about the things you can change. What are the things you can control? And those things are, you know, how hard you go and search for those research opportunities, right? And sometimes they're not where you are, like Alan just mentioned, right? Like there's an ABSA list. I didn't even know that, right? You go, you email 10, 15 people. You can either email 20 people or you can email no people and then just blame it on the fact that, well, there's no research happening at my community program. So I didn't, right? You can control. You can control whether you reply to the invite email that ABSA sends out saying, hey, committees or applications are open, right? You can either. So don't focus so much about where you went to med school, where you went to undergrad, where you're going to res. Those things are done. They are what they are. You know what I mean? make the best of what you have and focus on the things you can control, which is how much effort you put into your professional development years, how hungry you are about meeting people, about connecting with people in the field, about going to these conferences, about meeting in these committees. Put your effort there. The rest, don't sweat it, because there's nothing you can do about it, right? So it's my advice.
Thank you. I really want to thank all of you. I think all of your stories were very inspiring, and especially for those of us that are working towards getting to where you are. It gives us a lot of tips and a lot of ideas to work on and how to get to where you are. Dr. Casar, Dr. Utria, Dr. Perez, Dr. Perez, Dr. Quiroz, thank you very much for joining us for the panel and for answering all of our questions and being here with me tonight to help me also get where you are.
Yeah, and you know, I speaking of committees, I actually had the pleasure of being part of the membership committee for LSS. So again, one more tidbit, right? Be part of committees. And so on behalf of LSS, really thank you to everyone who joined us, who tuned in to the webinar. Truly special thanks to the panelists. I could see, I think Alex is still wearing her scrubs. I know Hallie's still wearing her scrubs, I think. So I know some of you are even still at work getting done wrangling gallbladders out of human bodies. So really thank you for joining. This is the first installment of a new series that we're calling Cosechando Éxito, right? Or Sowing Success. So along with the Inside the Operating Room series, we're hoping to use this to highlight other fellowship programs in the future. Okay, so thank you to everyone. Please check out Latino Surgical Society.org or look us up in the social media things under Latino Surgery, and connect. And we're here, and do consider applying for the organization, and you'll get to meet some really cool people. I know I have. So. All right. Have a good night, everyone. Take care. Oh, check out the video in our YouTube channel.